I'm Louis Robin. I'm a board member of CoC. So we welcome all of you, sometime first timers, others are people that normally come to our meetings. We have 6 semi-annual meetings and we have other meetings that I'll advise you of later, but to just remind everyone that the continuum of care is designed to promote community-wide commitment to the goal of ending homelessness. The CoC consists of partner agencies working together to promote access and utilization of their programs. All these programs are very important to the main purpose of us really being, as a board, we have a loose oversight of a lot of the federal money that comes into Columbus and Phoenix City. It's an unusual situation that the federal government set up several years ago in order to better see in the community what kind of results we're having. And I haven't been a member of that nice CoC that long, but I've been long enough to see that I'm very proud of all the results that y'all have been having, and especially on things like this year with the point in time count, because we actually measure everything we do. And at the CoC, of course, we thank goodness for Pat, even though she's not here today, and that great knowledge she has, and especially with grants. So we bring in a lot of money. And so when we have these meetings, we do reports, and we do also ask presenters to come in and help us where they can with the difficult tasks we have. But it's going to be interesting, the February point of time count, and because we have yearly figures going back, and it shows there's an awful lot of people that have been served and will continue to be served. But one of the things that we need to do as a CoC board and our agencies is also invite people from our agencies that never have really listened to a board meeting or whatever to attend these. Also, I'm going to also talk further about the navigation meeting at the end, but I don't want to belabor all my sales talk. So we have today some very good presenters that give us up-to-date situations. One of them, of course, is Angela Suggs with the Columbus Housing Authority. I've known Angela over 10 years. I've been as a board member, I came because I am an individual landlord in Columbus and Phoenix City. And I've been participating in their program for a number of years, find it to be very professional, but I find that there's a lot more people out there, especially landlords, that don't really understand it. And we also have now at the CoC and some of our agencies, caseworkers that are going to be working to help with these vouchers and other things. So I think even internally, this will be important for them. And I thank them also for their hard work and kind of putting together a new synopsis and format of what they do. And also I want to reassure them that they're mighty easy to work with because they understand their job real well. And they've been a real good, active part of the community. And as landlords around, there's not enough landlords helping. And we are sharing these problems together, and that's part of this at this meeting. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Angela and let her present, and then you at the end of hers or whenever like, any questions would be accepted. Thank you, Angela.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angela Suggs, Senior Inspector with the Columbus Housing Authority, and just briefly wanted to kind of go over how our process starts from beginning to basically to the end. If you don't have property on our program and need to place the property onto the program, you would go to the georgiahousingsearch.org website. From there, it will kind of explain to you exactly how you need to list everything on the website. There's also a landlord.
Jonathan Neil Richardson. I know you're probably finishing up your previous.
Neil,
so
Neil, could you mute your computer, please? Thank you. Angela?
Okay.
Angela, let me go ahead and start our PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
And then we'll move right on into each section, okay?
Okay.
Hold on just a moment while I start sharing my screen. Okay, can everyone see that screen? Can somebody let me know whether they can see it or not?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Of course, as Louis had mentioned, this is our semi-annual meeting. And here are, like he said, he introduced some of our speakers already. We'll go ahead and move into the information that Angela's speaking back now. Go ahead, Angela.
Okay. So basically the website is where you would start to list your property, for the Section 8 program. Once, you're eligible, once the family is eligible and interested in your unit, they would contact their caseworker. They will then receive an RTA. They would take that RTA to the landlord to have the landlord fill it out. That RTA then gets returned to the caseworker. And at that point, an inspection request is given to our department. We have 3 inspectors. That request is given to our department, and we will contact the landlord within 5 business days to set up an inspection of the property. However, there's a few things there that goes with that, that there's a lot of confusion on with landlords. The client is approved to rent for a certain amount based off of their income. However, when an inspector comes out to conduct the inspection, we have to do a comparability study to ensure that the unit itself is reasonable for rent for the amount that the landlord is requesting. So it's 2 different approvals for the rental amounts. That's one of the biggest things that we do see that is confusion that comes along.
And then once the unit has inspection, it's like 2 or 4 weeks to get paid.
Okay, yeah, once the unit does pass our inspection process, it can take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks for the finalized paperwork to be processed, which is what does tell HUD to submit payment on the unit. However, you are back paid from the time that it passed the inspection until that paperwork is processed. You're paid all the way through, so you don't actually lose any more money while you're waiting for that process to be complete. And that's basically that kind of sums it up. There is a landlord packet, and in that packet, there's an inspection guideline. And that guideline will take you just about 98% of everything that we look for on an inspection. It goes room for room. It's very self-explanatory. So that's included in that packet, along with a few examples of like what an RTA looks like, what a W-9 looks like that the landlord has to fill out. All of that information is included inside of that packet.
Also, if it's a new landlord that never had property on the program, make sure they submit their proof of ownership, proof of insurance, and the current lease, so that it won't hold the process of getting paid. Because we can hear in the unit until we have that information.
Okay, thank you, ladies. And that package will be sent out to everyone through email. So that will be an attachment to this PowerPoint as well. So the PowerPoint will be sent out to you as well. Okay, Mr. Louis.
Okay, Angela, I just have one other little clarification point that maybe a landlord could better understand. At the inspection, upon passing the inspection, that's the date that they can move in. Is that correct?
Correct.
So
The
see,
only
you might
time-
not get your money for 2 to 4 weeks, but you will get the money. There's
Right.
no
Now-
doubt about that. So it just
Now,
takes
Mr.
the
Louis-
paperwork flow to do that. But the main point is passing that inspection and you go ahead and, because you're going to have to put that on your lease as the start date.
Right. Now, the only time that's different is if the client is already residing in a Section 8 property,
Okay,
and they're in a vacate notice, then no matter when we pass the inspection, we cannot start the new landlord's rent until the day after that vacate notice is up. So example, if they're in a vacate notice that's not up until February the 28th, even if we pass the inspection on the 14th of February, that new landlord's rent cannot start until March 1st because we cannot pay 2 landlords for 1 client.
and after you get in, it goes from first to first.
Correct.
Everything's just like normal then.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure that some people will want those a packet of all that, because it's a lot of good information. And also from a CFC standpoint, if anyone needs a little more help, a landlord to be encouraged, feel free to give them my name and contact information, which I think you have. So thank you very much.
Correct.
Y'all do a great job,
Thank you, guys.
and we'll try to help y'all too find even more landlords this year.
Okay.
Okay, the next presenter is Lindsay Reese, the VAWA, which is in one other one of our agencies that has a great challenge, Stop Violence Against Women. I'm also a landlord that's participated in their program. It's another one of the local programs that is really doing a fine job. So without further ado, Lindsay, go right ahead.
Hey, so I'm here to talk about VAWA, which is the Violence Against Women Act. I'm echoing. Do y'all hear the echo? Is that better? Okay. The Violence Against Women Act is a federal law that affords protections to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. The intent of the VAWA Act and the VAWA rule is that all individuals have a right to a home without fear of violence. Expanding housing protections to increase safe housing. Safe housing reduces the risk of homelessness and decreases evictions. I don't know why it's echoing. Denials of housing assistance and instances of fleeing for survivors experiencing violence in their homes. So basically the components of this rule and of VAWA is that victimization cannot be used as a reason to deny access to housing or to evict from housing. Applicants cannot be denied based only on their status as a survivor of domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. And applicants cannot be denied access to housing based on factors directly related to the victimization, such as job history, credit history, or criminal record. Individuals cannot be evicted because of factors that were a direct result of victimization is the bottom line of that. For VAWA to kind of work, the documentation, you have to have certain documentation, and as all of our agencies, we all provide letters and different things that are forms, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But this is some of the stuff that is needed. If an applicant or tenant requests protection under VAWA, the recipient may provide the requested protection based solely on the applicant or tenant's request. So that basically if they're saying, I need this, that landlord can basically say, okay, I trust you with this situation and go forward. Ask the applicant or tenant to provide supporting documentation, which is proof of police reports, other things like that, but you don't have to have those for this to be in place. If documentation is requested by a landlord, they have to give that victim or that tenant at least 14 days to provide that documentation. If documentation is requested, the applicant or tenant may choose from any of the following documents. It's the HUD 5382, which is a victim self-certification form, and it's completed by the applicant and must be accepted without third-party documentation unless limited circumstances are met, as outlined, and I'll tell you about those in a minute. There's a record of court or law enforcement agencies or another type of statement or other evidence if allowed by the covered housing provider. So like basically Hope Harbor could send you something saying, yes, this is a client of ours. Please help us to move them or to do whatever to enact the VAWA stuff. And VAWA applies to federal funding. So housing programs must adhere to VAWA regulations and those requirements of that grantor. So most of us on the CoC receive federal funding for housing. So this applies to all of us. Skipping that page, sorry. When you're looking at VAWA, it's talking about who is protected and is victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking, who are applicants or currently living in your housing units. General rule is that an individual's status as a victim is not an appropriate basis to deny assistance or to terminate or evict. So basically you can't not let somebody move in because they're a victim, and you can't evict them. I mean, you can't evict them from your property if they are a victim. Unless there's like a certain exception, and basically it is if they are on sex offender registration or registry. I'm reading my notes. So I've talked about this. You cannot terminate or evict a victim merely because the person is a victim for any reasons associated with the victim. But you can terminate or evict for a violation not related to the domestic violence, or if there is an imminent threat to other tenants or those employed or working on the property. But you have to show other efforts of trying to prevent that eviction. For those that have a lease when this is in place, and as I'm going to say this word wrong, bifurcation, I don't know how to say the word. The program may remove a household member from a lease in order to evict, remove, terminate occupancy rights, or terminate assistance to such member who engages in criminal activity directly related to the domestic violence against an affiliated individual or other individual. So if my husband and I are both on the lease and he needs to be removed off the lease, you can do this with the VAWA stuff. Without regard to whether the household member is a signer on the lease or not. So that person can be evicted, leaving the victim there safely. Let's see. The HUD form 5380, which is notice of occupancy rights under the Violence Against Women Act form, and this is one of the ones that you have to have signed, explains the VAWA protections, including the right to confidentiality and other limitations on those protections. And HUD form 5382 is a certification of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or alternate documentation form that is completed by the victim. These documents have certain times that you have to give them. You have to give them at the time that an applicant is denied rental assistance or admission to a project-based unit. You have to give that to them at the time of an individual begins to receive rental assistance or is admitted to a project-based unit, or when notification of eviction from an assisted unit is received or the program terminates rental assistance. So those are the 3 different times that you have to provide these forms to them. All of this information obviously is very confidential when you're dealing with domestic violence victims. So the provider or the landlord must keep all of this confidential. It can be entered into a shared database. All the records need to be kept confidential. Employees cannot have access to information unless explicitly authorized for reasons that specifically require the employee to access it under the law. And then think through like how you communicate with the victim. Especially if this is going on, the victim still lives with the abuser and he has not been evicted yet. So landlords, you have to kind of think about those conversations when you are talking with the victim. And always discuss any of this stuff in a private setting. It doesn't need to be done in the parking lot of an apartment. It needs to be done in an office or someplace where that victim feels safe talking with you. So in the forms, everybody should have access to the forms or have seen the forms before. They're pretty standard and you just tailor them to your organization. I like Hope Harbor has one. I know Home for Good has one. So those are the things you have. Any questions on that? I went through that really quite fast. No questions?
Lindsay, this is Louis.
Hey, Louis.
It's one of the things that, of course, until you see the form, and some people just have a natural back away thought when they read forms such as this.
Yes.
But I also, I participated in the program, and then also have, in trying to get other landlords to participate, they bring up a lot of questions about this form. So I took the time to read it, try to really understand it. And it's really for everybody's protection. And that way, everybody knows their position. It's important for the landlord because it's scary in there. On some things, the landlord could have some liability. However, if you understand the form, you can figure out a way to protect yourself.
Right.
As the form and so this is another great reason we need to get together and have presentations like this, is that people don't know enough about it sometimes because they haven't really wanted to be educated as to who is this really helping. And anytime you take federal funds, you still have to realize what your legal responsibilities are. And I think you've done very good in explaining that. So if you ever need anybody to help work with a landlord, I volunteer because I understand this type of thing. But I understand how important it is, because this is one of the most important things we do in keeping people from being homeless. You think about how many women are out there victimized and are having to put up with it. This is hope, just like Hope Harbor. This is the hope. And with working with the professionals that we have here, you know, the odds are it's going to work out like they never would have believed.
Mhm.
Thank you again.
Thank y'all.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, number 3, the HMIS project set up. Charles, is Wally Hugo going to do this, or are you going to do it?
Wally will be doing that, and he is in the room.
Okay, Wally, welcome to us, and we're very much welcoming you because people don't realize it, but we're data driven, and all our data is right there in that HMIS system. So go right ahead.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon. I'm having some bandwidth issues. So I apologize that I'm not sharing video, but every time I turn it on, it makes my computer go funky. So just give me 1 second because I just want to be able to show this properly. So one of the things that Pat had tasked me with was to, and I'm going to take the screen for a minute, was to update. Can I get the screen for a minute? It's saying that I can't because somebody else says it.
Give me just a second.
Yeah, no problem. So what I was saying was one of the things that Pat tasked me with was making a simpler process, or simplifying the process to create a new project for client track. And one of the ways that we decided to do this was to create an electronic form. So I went ahead and I created a Google document, Google form, excuse me, where you would basically complete all the same information that you would on the paper copies or in Excel. But instead of having to either print it out and scan it and send it over, or having to save it properly and then sending it over, everything can be done electronically through the site. So it's pretty basic, it's pretty self-explanatory, but I just wanted to go ahead and run through it because you would just go ahead and fill out the information for yourself. This is if you are a new project or you're updating existing information. So for the sake of the presentation, I'm just going to do new. Here are all the names of all organizations currently in client track. So if you're not listed on here, you go ahead and say not listed and enter your name and your project. This is very important information here, the address information, so that way we can make sure that the information that is registered into HMIS is accurate, and especially for your federally funded projects is very important, because this zip code right here will determine not only your geocode, but also the type of geography you're under. And if you do any kind of reporting or enter this information for your organization, you're familiar with what that means. And again, the project types, these are straight from our HUD manuals. And if you have any questions about these, I would definitely ask your grants person at your organization. They would definitely know this information, or whoever's responsible for federal grants. This again is when is the project starting, if you know, or if you're updating and it's already ended, when did it end? This target population, this is one of those items where it's very specific. Is this serving domestic violence victims, like you were talking about, or persons with HIV? It's been definitely delineated since in the last few years. It used to be a longer list. HOPWA, if you participate in HOPWA, then you would already know this information. Same with this. Most projects, probably all projects, are going to choose this NA because you're not HOPWA funded, and you would know if this was a yes. The housing types. This is mainly for housing projects, things that have to do with a roof over somebody's head. Are they all in the same place? Are they throughout? Are they in multiple places? Like you have 2 different sites for an emergency shelter, or are they scattered through the community, like rapid rehousing? Again, funding source, this is not a required field, because if you know what the funding source is, then you would select it. If you do not need to worry about this for project setup. It's something that, again, if you're federally funded, you would already know, or you can ask your grants person in your organization. This is also important. Does this project have beds? So if you're an emergency shelter, transitional housing program, PSH, rapid housing, any of those, you would say yes. Otherwise, you say no if you're like street outreach. But in this case, I'm going to say yes. Oh, that's my fault. So see, that's a good example of what would happen if you forget to fill out some required information. And the proper date format helps. Oh my goodness. Can't believe I missed all that. Okay, so when we're talking about bed inventory, these are the beds that your project expects to have in whatever time frame your grants for. So this would actually be one of the things that needs to be updated when you have a change in inventory. So like if your emergency shelter for whatever reason has 20 beds today, but then 2 months from now, they go up to 35 beds, you would want to update this information. And then also for what population is it for? Is it for households without children, single adults, or households with at least one child and one adult and one child, so families with minor children, or is it a household with only children? These are the different population types for the different beds you could have in your system. It also goes down to, these are very important, and we would need this information for all of your bed projects. Beds designated for chronic homeless veterans. This is basically just going down this different types of subpopulations that you would have in your homeless system. So chronic homeless veteran, youth veteran, any other veterans, then chronic youth, other youth, and then any other chronic beds, since you've already pretty much got the chronic breakdown up here. Then any beds that are not dedicated to any kind of special population, and then how many units those beds represents. So if you have if you have like a permanent supportive housing project with 4 units, that could easily be 20 beds, or excuse me, well, yeah, 20 could work, but let's say 16 for sake of the example. So you could say you have 4 units, 4 apartments, and they each have 4 beds for a total of 16 beds. So now moving on, like with would be your primary eligibility description. So what do you look for? What kind of persons do you serve? Let's just say single mothers with up to 2 children. Let's just say that's because of the size of your units. Oh. And then we would also need to know, okay, well, when we make a referral to your agency, who's this going to? And what is the number to call in that case? Oh, this is the email. Sorry. And then the phone number. These next set of questions are basically for special cases, if you will, that may come up and often do. And the community would want to know before referring a person, just because of the nature of the circumstance. So open warrants, open cases without plea, sex offenders. Does the program require a state ID? Do you require a social security card, a birth certificate? Is it wheelchair? Is it wheelchair accessible, or do you have an elevator for someone who's unable to walk? Hearing and visual impairments, do you have accommodations for that? Do you have accommodations for service animals? Gender identification for transgendered individuals. Sober is a sobriety requirement. Is there a ban list? Does your project keep a ban list of who's definitely not allowed to be on your project at the time? Does the project allow people who are unable to do self-care? Do you allow persons who have exited in the last 30 days? Does your shelter provide 24 hours operation, and does it have a third shift staff workers? Is income a requirement? So those are a set of questions that, based on history, it's become a good practice to ask those questions to make sure upfront before referring, because those tend to be barriers to program entry that we would like to know upfront, so we're not sending people in circles or anything like that. And then finally, the availability and intake hours. When would a client expect to be contacted, or when would a client be able to go in after having accepted a referral? And then any notes and comments about your project that you may have. So if you're doing multiple ones at the same time, you could go ahead and submit another one. But this is simply to be able to get more expediency in the way that projects are set up in ClientTrack, and also to be able to have access to them quicker in as opposed to having to fill out a form, go like multiple steps. You just go to one place and it'll all occur from one location. Are there any questions in regards to that? And it seems that was a pretty fast demonstration there, but I'm willing to answer any questions you might have about this or the process.
Wally, this is Denise. Could you tell us, once you submit that form, who does it go to?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, of course. The form will be going to Charles and Pat, who have access to this account, and they'll be setting up the project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, our next presenter is Terry Gallops, Equal Opportunity. You got the screen set? Okay.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Okay, most of us are familiar with the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in a nutshell, these terms mean that we recognize the differences in the people around us, and that we're going to make it sure that everyone is provided the same access to programs that are fair and non-discriminatory, and that the people also have the access to the same possible outcomes. It means that all people are made to feel welcome and comfortable in your business, in their dealings with you. You can go on to the next one. Research consistently shows disparity in the treatment of and services that are provided to the LGBTQ community versus those for people who are non-LGBTQ. People who of color who are members of the TQ community are 2 times more likely to be homeless than their white counterparts. They're almost 2.5 times more likely to be homeless than non-LGBTQ. I'm sorry. People, and they're 4 times more likely to be homeless than white non-LGBTQ people. Next slide. These are the reported experiences of people who are members of the LGBTQ community. And they're not very good. The next slide. We have posted policies. Everybody who receives HUD funding should have these policies posted. The equal access rule is designed to enforce that the policies are equal and inclusive. Right now, there are 27 states, including Georgia and Alabama, who do not have LGBTQ non-discriminatory protections. There are 20 states plus the District of Columbia that have full non-discriminatory protections. The other states have some protections, but are not fully non-discriminatory. We have this policy should be posted at all access points for people, at all coordinated entry access points, websites and online portals. Next slide. Now, if a person declares preferred pronouns, then that preference should be honored. If the client appears uncomfortable at the intake, you can model your behavior by saying, my name is Terry, my pronouns are her and she. And then when they provide theirs, you honor that. Next slide. All paperwork, contracts, assessment tools should be short and to the point and recognize the communities that we represent. They should also have questions on that are relative to the audience. For example, you wouldn't ask a 16-year-old if he or she were a veteran. You know, we have to use common sense. And I know on the VI SPDAT, there's a question where you have to ask the participant if she's pregnant. And we laugh every time someone slips up and asks a male that question because we go through it so fast. Next slide. And it goes the same for your agreements and your contracts. They should be non-discriminatory and show that you support non-discriminatory approaches to providing services. Next slide. This is the equal access rule. This is what we have posted. You'll see it says Home for Good at the top. That's what we have posted in our office. They make a version of it. Just you can find like I did. I just converted it to a Word document so that I could insert Home for Good there. And you can do the same with your organizations. Anybody have any questions about that? Nope. The link is included in the references when we send out the this PowerPoint presentation. The links for this form will be on there. That's all I have.
Okay, well, thank you very much. All this is new to a lot of us, but it is very pertinent because it's these are recognitions of personal identity that our federal government has adopted. And in the way we have to approach it in our community is to follow these outlines and rules and guides. Because one thing we want to do is respect each human being's prerogative to a safe housing and not be discriminated against. So it's just coming in different ways, and we'll adjust to it. Thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation. Okay, the next one, Denise McWhirter on the point in time count. This is, of course, we normally did it in January, but this is the second year we do it in February. But this is a great count, and without further ado, Denise, take it along way.
Thank you, Louis. I'd like to go ahead and remind everyone to go ahead and put your name and your organization in the chat box so we can get record of who is with us today. I'll go ahead and start with a little bit of information about our point in time count to let everyone know that this year it has been moved to the end of February, as we did last year. HUD give us a waiver to do that, and we are finding that a lot of municipalities are doing that because of the high cases of COVID. So we did take advantage of that waiver for our community as well. Our sheltered count is going to be on Tuesday evening, February 22nd. Starts at 5:30 in the afternoon. We do ask those that are registered for that training to meet here at the Home for Good office. And on the unsheltered count is the next morning, February 23rd, and it starts at 5:30 in the morning. We do ask everyone to be here as well. And there's our address at 1100 First Avenue here in Columbus. Now, we are located in the First Presbyterian Church, and the best way to get to our office is to park on the 11th Street side. So if anyone has any questions about our point in time count or would like to register or volunteer for that, just give us an email or a call. The whole staff will be able to assist you. And if you feel comfortable contacting Pat next week, please do so. And I'll go ahead and give a little bit of information about our Continuum of Care committees. The Performance and Outcomes Committee, I'm not going to read verbatim on these. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things to read about it. Of course, you know, the PowerPoint's going to come to you. You can read it in depth, but if you do need additional information, please reach out to us. We can give you a little bit more information on it. Our Performance and Outcome Committee for the Continuum of Care, let me see, the Performance and Outcomes Committee, they collaborate with our CoC administrator for CoC funded entities and memberships. And they do this to conduct gap analysis and to make recommendations to the board for approval. They establish performance outcomes, performance targets, and they monitor recipients and subrecipients' performance. They also develop performance measures, and they evaluate outcomes for projects and provide outcome data to HUD. And they also consult for available resources that's relevant for our community. That's a little bit of highlights for the Performance and Outcome Committee. I'll go on to the Continuum of Care Application Committee. We actually have a committee that reviews our applications. That way we know that we've dotted every I and crossed every T on that. And this application committee, they help develop a consolidated application. It's for Muskogee and Russell County. And they are the ones that make recommendations to our boards to let us know whether an organization is performing as they should. And they do reallocations of monies. If we do have an organization that is not going to participate with our Continuum of Care that they did in the previous years, it's our responsibility to reallocate that money to a new project. Because with the Continuum of Care, if you don't use a set of money, HUD will take it away from you. And that's not right, but that's the way it is. So we always, when we find an organization that may not need the funding that year, we're very quick to come together to say, we've got another project in place because we don't want that money to go away. And we've been very lucky over the past few years to answer that call for the community and keep those funds rolling back in. And the Continuum of Care Application Committee also reviews any grievances we have with any of our applicants. One of the other committees is called Mainstream and Outreach. They work with the service providers, and they do this to improve the connections between persons experiencing homelessness and the mainstream services. They oversee education and outreach for a homeless population, and they also provide updates to our board considering gaps in services. And our next committee is called HMIS and Data Committee. And our other presenter, Wally, was speaking a little bit more about the HMIS data information. So you see how important that is for all of our projects within the community. Now, we have a committee that works with the Continuum of Care and closely with our HMIS advocates in the community. And they work with us in order to, they develop plans for monitoring for the HMIS. They have to satisfy all the requirements of HUD, and they make sure that all of the requirements are met. And they also fulfill any obligations that we have that HUD throws at us. And some of the last bit of information for that is, of course, the data collection for our shelter and point time count, our housing inventory chart, our annual homeless assessment report, and the annual performance report. Now, all of these reports are required by HUD. So there's a lot of them. So that's why we felt it very pertinent to form a committee to make sure that we don't miss anything. We have another committee that's called the Coordinated Entry Committee. And this group works with the CoC to coordinate all the entry systems. That's consistent and uniform assessment and referrals to process all of the information that's coming in. It's ongoing. It reviews our policies, procedures all through the year to ensure that we are adhering to everything that HUD puts out, because a lot of times they'll come halfway through the year and they're throwing another regulation at us. Well, we have to add that regulation in immediately. And so we do have this committee that reviews that information and implements it right then. We don't wait for the next year. It's done automatically. And that's of course for our policies and our procedures. And it definitely is a client-focused group that works on the housing first priorities. And of course, our last one, our point in time count committee. This is a committee that also we oversee and conduct the point in time count, which we're right in the middle of right now. And we work with our street for the street count and the shelter count of those that are experiencing homelessness. And that is all about the committees. We do ask that if you are interested in being a part of one of these committees, please let us know. We can send you a membership form for you to sign up for. And we do welcome anyone's expertise in that area. You may have found something that you like and you have something to add to it. We are always welcoming for that information. And Mr. Louis, that's all I have on this.
Well, thank you very much, Denise. This is, of course, I've been studying those records, and they are very indicative of really what's going on. And of course, as you can see with all these committees, this oversight of the money, basically, but it's mainly oversight with that money, all the people that we were set up to serve being served, because that is our whole process and purpose. And there's the activity that goes on through this CFC is remarkable. And so I know it'll work out, and we'll even show that the results are properly read and understood so that in the next year, we can see what we could do better to help these people. And that's where I'm going to next, is some of the old business of what really is lacking in this particular process. Well, right now, in order to serve the homeless situation, we've been doing it at CoC basically as through voucher programs and putting people that were homeless into homes. One of the things we added this past year in one of the grants that Pat got us was we've added caseworkers. That's one of the missing things that we've had. Of course, over at the housing authorities, they have caseworkers. And that's one of the reasons that they are able to really do a superb job in getting that person through the federal process of having housing. However, that is taking a person that's already homeless. One of the other things that's really been missing and has been taken care of to a small degree in the community is prevention. Of course, I grew up in helping this type of thing, working in a prevention agency locally. So this prevention funds, we have been promised it in the past and never got it. And Pat taught us really good. Don't count the money until it comes. And so all these committees and all this work we do and set up these projects on the HMIS, it's all dependent on us having landlords. And landlords, and throughout this whole last couple of years of the pandemic, have had a lot of difficulties with situations in renting. However, most of it has been around past due rents and evictions and all these type things, and the upsides and downsides of evictions, courts doing this and not doing it. We've had an awful lot of conditions of the property in question and all this, but I think that with the funds, of course, there again, in talking with John Castile earlier, there is prevention funds, even in their thing, but we just don't have the housing. So I think the largest challenge to Columbus and Phoenix City and Russell County, Muskogee, is how are we going to better get our share of those homes that would be successfully rented through these programs. We have, even in some of the programs, of course, The voucher programs have had bad names by people that really are not educated to it. Is, well, some of the tenants tear up the place, or, you know, the deposits don't take care of it, and evictions are a problem. Well, that's true to a degree, but it's a minority of the people. However, in some of these grants that we've got in prevention, there is a possibility of funds, if they did tear it up, that they would be made whole with this. And of course, one of the things there is now with the prevention money and having caseworkers, I think we would be able to monitor that better than it's ever been done. And it would offer that landlord some additional buffer. The landlords have been under challenge, as I have been working with some of them on the eviction processes and the past due rents. The state of Georgia received roughly $552 million last year on these payment of rent. Well, you know, we have to admit and bring forth the failures too. So this is the biggest failure we've had for landlords and tenants, and this program has not been handled properly. And as of October, November, of our 552 million, less than 25% of it has been put out. And we can't get any real information out there. And some of the people that I've worked with in local community have dropped that program because they can't get answers. I also participated in it, and the one in Alabama. Alabama has been a little better in Georgia, but it's still, though, they've said, oh yeah, it's approved, but we never can get, we don't know when the money will ever come. But these are the things we need to overcome. I just look at it as a challenge. And I challenge each of you that are here today, think about this. If you know somebody, a landlord, would you recommend that they contact, you know, Pat or Denise and get on a list so we can bring you together at a meeting to see how we can help overcome this, because we have reason to believe within the month we'll have somebody local that can help us out on this prevention funds of the state of Georgia. We're not at liberty right now to talk about it, but what we really want to do is see what we can do to help the landlords with this situation of getting money that's out there. And not only that, the main reason, we need more housing. They've got so many vouchers at both housing authorities that are out, and that they just can't find the housing. So right now, the biggest challenge to the community itself is the lack of housing, not just low income, but mainly low income and all across the board. We've also got a big support in the community from the mayor's office. I'm not speaking for the mayor, but he is very interested in this. And and Pat has constant contact with them, and because they have funds locally, but that spreads money into all areas of this homelessness. Because you end up not just as rent, you've got utilities, you've got all kinds of situations that go on there, that in order to get somebody in a home and keep them there, you know, you've got to coordinate it with everybody. So we have a better opportunity now, even though we hadn't been doing a good job. I challenge each of you to find somebody that's a landlord and turn it in. And we're going to be contacting these people, and we're going to recommend that we have a navigation meeting every month. And in that navigation meeting, everyone that's part of this whole process, we get together on a Zoom call, and we can answer the problems quickly, and we can discuss them so that everybody knows where we come from. Another thing that I challenge you to do is, since there is a lot of money out there still not being used, if you know somebody that is past due on the rent or is about to be evicted or whatever, call 211. That's the best number anybody could call, because that's a clearinghouse for the funds that are available locally. And there's a lot of agencies, I mean, churches, all kind of agencies that have some funds, and it's coordinated through that. So we have the tools. We just need everyone to pitch in to figure out how can we get in touch with more landlords to participate. Even if we just upped it 5 or 10%, that would be helpful, because the people are out there. I get calls every day on homes that I don't have. And it's not just a lower income. It goes all the way up to $1,200 a month and that type thing. But what I'm really asking as a challenge, you know, we're doing a good job with what we've got, but we've got to do a better job. And all of you, you're not, you know, I think all of us that are involved in this is we're doing this to help the community not have those numbers of people that are going through these terrible times. A lot of it's due to COVID. A lot of it's just the job market and that type of thing. There's so many reasons, but let not the reasons get in our way. Let's put it all together like we have here at the CFC level, we're through the meetings and the funds that we've got, let's try to bring more people involved. These meetings are open. We invite everybody to participate, and we look forward to a year of increasing the participation and spreading the good news that we are able to help these people, but we need more help within the local community. And then without foreclosing, I would offer open floor to anybody. If you have any questions of me or any of the people that presented, be glad to talk at this time or offer, if I don't have an answer, I always will find it for you. But I just hope that that we can get more participation in meetings and truly to coordinate all our efforts for those homeless people that we're trying to help. Okay, anybody with questions?
Thank you, Louis. I just want to let everyone know that the links to everything that we've discussed today are up on the screen, and we will be sending the PowerPoint to you, so you'll have those email addresses and the links as well.
And it's another good thing. We've set it to have the meeting over an hour, and it looks like we're just making it. So thank you again for your participation, and look to hear from you.
Does anyone have any questions for anyone before we close the meeting?
Okay, we'll officially close our semi-annual meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, everyone.